Let's talk about the latest NHS scandal. Yes, the nurse Lucy Letby has officially been found guilty of destroying so many lives, and we're going to be talking about the fundamental problem with the system that allows something like this to happen. Now, over the last few years, everything I've said on this case has actually happened. Unfortunately, she was allowed to still work during the investigation. She has been found guilty, and the problem goes to the top of the NHS management. Now, there are a lot of issues with this. As you guys now know, Lucy Letby, who's they're taken so many lives, their babies, and people who could have had a great future in their lives, and families have been destroyed for years. Now, we have an issue when it comes to the NHS cover-up. Of course, as usual, we found out that NHS management, they were at best complacent, at worst obviously they were turning a blind eye because they didn't really want bad reputation. Now, Dr. Stephen Brewery is one of the people who's come out to criticize the NHS management at the Countess Chester Hospital, and talking about how these people were completely ignoring any of the warnings coming from inside the ward, so by other senior nurses and doctors who were trying to raise alarm bells. But the NHS management, with all the lucrative salaries and packages that they have, they didn't really mind because they liked Lucy Letby. So what's going on here? So a couple of things about what's happened in Chester under the NHS management is that doctors were silenced by the NHS bosses, and in terms of calling the police, that was also massively delayed. After a number of emails, phone calls and meetings, they didn't really want to do that. And now the whole thing has massively backfired. So first things first, let's talk about how this cover-up actually happened. Doctors in that unit wanted to meet with hospital bosses. This is back in 2016, 2nd of March. There's an email saying that I think we still need to talk about Lucy. Maybe when you're back and free, the three of us can meet to talk about it. This was Steve. But again, that was ignored. Firstly, there was enough evidence at the time in terms of the smoking gun, because all the babies who lost their lives, Lucy Letby was on shift for every single one of them. And this was obviously examined in court, and it became quite evident of what was actually happening. It was evident enough for people who were working in the hospital to at least be suspicious at first, and then kind of have the instinct to be proven right. So it wasn't one of those completely mysterious cases when other people were already thinking that this whole thing is a little bit dodgy. But where were the NHS management? This is the main question. So senior doctors wanted to bring in the police. This is now back in June 2016. One of them said, I believe we need help from outside agencies who can deal with suspicion. At the moment, we are all under suspicion, and the only agency who can investigate all of us, I believe, is the police. This is the only agency who can know our past history and our life outside the hospital, which might shed more light. I think we should be proactive about this whole thing in terms of seeking help. But nothing was happening following that either. Now, the management, this is the medical director of Countess of Chester Hospital, Ian Harvey, sent out an email to staff saying, can you stop talking about Lucy Letby? Saying this is absolutely being treated with the same degree of urgency. It has already been discussed and action is being taken. All emails cease forthwith. We will share with you what actions we're taking. So they basically said, stop talking about this issue. It's not really an important thing. Just focus on your work. This is the job of the management of any organization, to be on top of things rather than covering it up, despite numerous warnings coming from inside the ward itself. Doctors were also forced to apologize to nurse Lucy Letby in 2017 on the 28th of April. This is an email saying, well, dear Lucy, the increased mortality on the neonatal unit and subsequent reviews and redesignation of the neonatal unit has been a very stressful time for all staff and parents. We understand that it has been an exceptionally stressful time for you. We would like to apologize for any inappropriate comments that may have been made during this difficult period. As you will be aware, emotions have run high. We are very sorry for the stress and upset that you have experienced in the last year. Please be reassured that patient safety has been our absolute priority during this difficult time. They actually apologized to Lucy Letby. Ian Harvey, one of the top people in the hospital, and is one of the people responsible for this cover-up. These people were told what was happening, and they made a conscious decision not to do anything about it. So Lucy Letby has been found guilty. She's going to serve her sentence, yes. But what about the others? This problem goes to the fundamental flaw in the system that allows it to happen. If it were, like many other countries and many other institutions, a one-off case, a one rogue individual, then that would be a whole different case. What we've seen, a historic trend of toxic culture inside the NHS when it comes to scandals. How many hospitals have we had over the last few years, over the last few decades, who have had systemic problems and people have lost their lives? How many times the police and local authorities and the NHS were either involved or complacent about certain crises across the country over the last few decades? How many times do we have to go through the same thing for us to find out that the system is not working? It's not really just one or two individuals. It's a systemic issue. Now, the government have come out to call for an inquiry, right? They released this press release saying government orders independent inquiry following Lucy Letby verdict. There's a bit of an issue with this inquiry because Steve Barclay, who's the health secretary, said, "I would like to send my deepest sympathy to all the parents and families impacted by this horrendous case. This inquiry will seek to ensure the parents and families impacted get the answers they need. I am determined that their voices are heard and they are involved in shaping the scope of the inquiry should they wish to do so." But then at the end they said, after careful consideration, a non-statutory independent inquiry was found to be the most appropriate option. So you're not even going to have a proper one. You're not going to have a legal inquiry. You're just going to have an inquiry, a so-called independent inquiry. For those of you familiar with the TV shows by either Yes Minister or The Thick of It, who are supposed to be comedy or sitcom, this was always mentioned, even at the time, that when you want something to just move on, you call an inquiry, independent inquiry. And that's just essentially a gimmicky move to get something done without actually doing anything about it. So if it's not going to be statutory, then what's the point of doing it? You're not going to get real answers. You're not going to be able to get witnesses to be told to actually go and provide evidence. So people like Ian Harvey and many others, if they are to be answering serious questions, well, they don't have to face consequences if you're not going to have a proper inquiry. So then we have the hospital also coming out yesterday in Chester to release this statement. Let's just watch a few seconds of it because I also have a problem with what they said here.
Our staff are devastated by what has happened, and we are committed to ensuring that lessons continue to be learned. We are grateful for the cooperation of our staff, especially those that have maintained the utmost professionalism whilst giving evidence in this trial.
We are continuing to ensure that lessons are to be learned. How many times have we heard this from the establishment? Oh, lessons are going to be learned from this. Every single time. What lessons are you talking about? Have you actually learned anything? Are you going to make radical changes? Or are you just going to say, oh, that was naughty, let's move on, let's continue, without making actual changes, reforms in the system? It's disgusting what's going on in our country right now in the establishment. The good people of this country deserve much better. One of the fundamental issues I have with this whole case was the fact that Lucy Letby was still allowed to work during a very deep and serious investigation instead of being suspended. People said this on social media. One person said, if you're accused of a crime this hideous, you should be suspended indefinitely until a verdict is decided. It's ridiculous that she was allowed to carry on working 3 more years after the first suspicions. But this is the whole problem. So we have an issue with bureaucracy. So that's the top of the NHS. We have an issue with policing in general. And in this case, the police eventually did their job. Great. Because there was enough smoking guns around. But there's also an issue with justice system, the judiciary, because that has to also be reformed to make sure the sentences are correct, but also to ensure that there is some sort of a mechanism to allow whistleblowers to come forward, to allow management to suspend someone who is actually being investigated for something very serious. It is not just a classic white-collar criminal who can still allow to be working from home while the investigation goes through. This is very different. But no, absolutely no urgency for the establishment to make any radical changes. We're not even going to have a statutory inquiry about this. Now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section about this story. I'm Mahyar Tousi, and we are the media.